whatever happens to it in the city can't be any worse than tree branches doing pinstripes down the side of the car on a narrow trail. I sold my daily driver that I had for quite a few years, which was a 2002 Acura TL Type S. Served me very well, but just like every other TL Type S that's out there from that era, the transmission eventually imploded. So it's up to me to find myself a new daily driver. While I'm a big Audi fan, and obviously a big wagon fan because I like Audis, I decided I wanted to have an S4 Avant. The issue is that the V8 S4 Avant is notoriously known for its timing chains failing. And I didn't want to deal with that. Plus, at the time, while the values of the B7 Avants are now going crazy, at the time they were worth nothing, so they were in a really bad state of repair. My attention focused to the B8, which is the 2010 to 2016 Audi S4. It was facelifted in 2013, but they never sold an S4 wagon in the US in that body style. I decided that I would set about getting a donor car and getting a wagon and making myself one because it has been done a couple times, and apparently all it is swapping a bunch of components over and making a couple computers happy with each other and you're good to go. In looking for an S4 as a donor car, I was looking on IAAI, Copart, and every time I went to bid on a salvaged car, they went for ridiculous money. And I actually think that I was bidding on the car that I ended up buying down the road. After my Copart and IAAI failures, I decided, maybe I should just keep an eye out for a rebuilt Title one. It's probably going to end up being the same money anyway, and I can drive it for a few months until I eventually rip it apart. Looking on Facebook Marketplace one fateful evening, I saw a rebuilt Title 2010 S4 with higher mileage, 140, loaded up, had blind spot, had sport differential, push button start, the whole nine. Went out to look at it, ended up negotiating with the guy and getting him shrewdly down to $6,500, which wasn't a terrible price considering that they're still clean title, probably $12,000 to $15,000 cars, and drove it home. Once I got it home, I started looking for an A4 wagon, and I ended up injuring my back. I herniated a couple discs, and the idea of doing a motor swap in a small cramped garage with a bad back, and while having tools, not a lift, just started looking more and more unfeasible. And the idea occurred to me that a few years ago, a friend of mine who had an Audi SQ5, which is the SUV version, had put H&R S4 lowering springs on his SQ5 and dropped it down, down, down. So my brain started working and going, well, if S4 springs work on an SQ5, will SQ5 springs work on an S4? And I hit the internet. And what I discovered was that the suspension parts were all identical except for the springs and struts. I then did a little bit further research and I discovered that Bilstein makes a suspension set, struts and shocks front and back for the S4, and it works on S4, A4, Q5, all of them. And that tells me that all the shock shafts are the same length. So at that point I knew all I needed was a set of SQ5 springs and I could theoretically lift an S4. So I went on the forums, found a set of SQ5 springs for $100 shipped them right over to me, went on Tire Rack, did some educated guessing, bought the smallest 18-inch BF Goodrich KO2s I could find, which was a 255/55, and I had to do 18-inch wheels to clear the brakes, so I ended up buying a set of OZ rallies that fit perfectly. And again, a bunch of guessing, didn't know if it was going to work, ended up taking it to the shop, and everything fit. I had to do a little bit of fender rolling in the front, but it all worked, and I ended up with an S4 on goofy-looking rally tires. I had to add to this effect, of course, because, the original Quattro rally cars had 6 lights on the front, so, of course, I had to bolt 6 lights on the front. So I went on eBay, bought the cheapest big LED fog lights I could find, had a friend of mine weld up a light bar bracket, wired it up, and we had lights on the front. I ended up throwing on mud flaps and a carbon spoiler just to kind of balance out the look. Threw on some skid plates and off to the races. The Keen project is why I ended up doing this with the S4. I saw that 911, fell in love with it, and went, man, I'd love to have something like that one day. And it sprung to mind when I was looking at the car and going, well, I can't tear this car apart right now. So what should I do? And that's always been in the back of my mind. I think that, like Matt Farah describes, that he can slide the car around. He doesn't have to worry about speed bumps. It rides better because it's got thicker tires on it. It is really good. And I actually, with the S4, the nice thing is I live so close to New York City, it's a great car for me to take into the city because I can park it anywhere and I don't care about it getting scratched, dinged, dented, hit. I don't care about potholes. I don't care about anything because whatever happens to it in the city can't be any worse than tree branches doing pinstripes down the side of the car on a narrow trail. People see the car on the road, and I've seen a couple Facebook posts of like the Safari S4 isn't real, and then a picture of the S4 Safari with my car sitting there. I get a lot of questions of, do you take it off-road? And as a matter of fact, I do. So I've taken it some places where I'm sure a Jeep has never been. A friend of mine has a large amount of property up in the woods, and he has a bunch of trails. It will keep up with the side-by-sides on the trails, no problem, while cranking the AC with the windows open, the sunroof open, if you need the heated seats on, if it's cold out, Sirius radio, the whole nine, and it handles it with ease, which is really funny considering that it's a sports sedan. The best part of the whole thing is because it has a sport differential, well, a sport differential is an electronically locking differential, and what do you really want when you're off-road? You want the ability to lock your differential. So it ends up working out that it gets really good grip off-road and rides really well. To the point where my friends' kids don't want to ride in the side-by-sides and want to ride in the S4 with me because it's significantly more comfortable and quiet. It's served its purpose really well. I've put about 15,000 miles on the whole setup. It's been a lot of fun, but I'm starting to tire of it. I get bored with cars very easily, and I just got an S-Class that I'm starting to daily, so I probably will be putting it back to stock soon and selling it because I doubt anybody wants a rally car, but it's certainly been an interesting experiment and might have to do it again in the future. I've seen a lot of the Cayenne safari'd out, which seems to be a really good conversion. A friend of mine has a Touareg that has the same lift kit on it, same suspension, and it works out really well. You know, the 911's really great to safari out, but at the end of the day, it's a sports car, so it lacks utility. While it's reliable enough to be an everyday car and it has some trunk space, it'll never be a wagon. So I think to me, I see that Taycan Cross Turismo or whatever it's called, that's really cool. But I think I'd want something smaller, like an S4 wagon would be a really cool thing, or like a 335 wagon. But I think, yeah, 335, a 340 wagon, or an S4 wagon would be a really cool car to safari out.